woman came through the drive-thru a while back, not in a vehicle or anything. Just walked up to the window, which happens sometimes. People on walks will just come up and buy something. It's even more common since we've had our dining room closed most nights. But I just can't shake this woman from my head. I didn't think she seemed out of place, not physically. Drive-thrus get all types of people. I mean, some people really stick with you because of how strange they are. Like a man yelling at me because I handed his girlfriend her soda too aggressively. This woman wasn't like that. She was remarkably average. She looked middle-aged, Midwestern, a blouse on with a cross, just a bit too big, and hair straight out of the 80s. She had asked for a small vanilla shake and a small fry, paying with a crumpled up bill. She told me to keep the change, grabbed the food, and walked away into the woods behind the store. But before she left, I think she kissed me? Just my hand, not like a full kiss or anything, but her mouth grazed against my hand when I was passing her the food, just for a second, and I can't get that out of my head. For all intents and purposes, she should just be another customer in a long line of customers I serve every day. She wasn't even particularly unusual, but these past few nights, I feel like I can't sleep, like she's stuck somewhere behind my eyelids. After that night seeing her, I began having issues. For one, I started seeing bugs on my skin. It was probably due to the lack of sleep, but I'd see them in the corner of my eyes, crawling against my arm. They weren't there. When I really looked and focused my eyes, they'd be gone. It always made me feel on edge. Just the thought of a bug on me makes my skin crawl. Sometimes I would find myself absent-mindedly scratching a spot that I'd seen a bug before. It would help that skin-crawling feeling go away, at least sometimes. I think my coworkers chalked it up to addiction. A lot of them had gone through it themselves and always treated me extra nice if I had a bad itching day. I thought it was sweet, even if they didn't know my real problem. I'd also been losing time, mostly when I'd work the back window away from everyone else. It would get worse at night too. I'd find myself in the deep freezer or sweeping the floor, closing up for the night when I wouldn't even remember it getting dark outside. I really didn't mind it much, though. Sometimes it would be nice to not have to work a full shift. Surprisingly, given my state, the general manager was talking about promoting me to shift manager. It was an exciting prospect. It means no more wearing a hat and apron, more responsibilities, but sadly no pay raise. I'd still be happy even without a pay raise, but one of the responsibilities of the job is to inventory the downstairs freezer. Normally, I wouldn't have to go down there. The only thing they keep down there is frozen buns that the managers bring up to thaw daily, but soon it would be my job too. Most fast food chains don't have basements. It's entirely impractical. But since our chain replaced a family-owned company, we strangely have one. It's a large space, unfinished, always wet, dimly lit, somehow always a dark shade of green. You can't turn on the lights until you are at the bottom of the stairs, and even then the light comes from singular bulbs on strings that barely illuminate the room. It was eerie, and I dreaded having to do inventory alone, so killing two birds with one stone, I switched to day shifts. The doctor thinks it would be best. Something about my circadian rhythm being messed up by working at night. After switching shifts, I found that I really liked it. Opening early in the morning has a strange sort of magic to it. The quietness is peaceful, and the sun always streams into the building, sometimes making little rainbows on the caked, grime-covered floors. My sleep improved, and the imaginary bugs went away. My arms finally get a chance to heal, now crisscrossed with bandages to keep the oozy patches contained. I felt refreshed. Even going down into the basement doesn't affect me that much anymore. Just knowing that the sun is out and shining keeps her from my thoughts. At least it had until last week, when I saw her again. It had been a few months on the day shift, and I was about to leave for the night to go home, and suddenly she was there, inside the building, waiting for me at the cash register, her nails tapping against the plastic countertop. She was taller than me, domineering. She frightened me, staring at me expectantly with eyes so radiantly blue they seemed to glow. "Ma'am, our inside dining area's closed for the day, but we can help you through the drive-thru," I had said. "You aren't working nights anymore?" Her voice was deeper than I had anticipated, fuller, scratchy, like a heavy smoker. It didn't match her physical appearance at all. Taking a closer look at her, she seemed sick, her eyes reddish, her nose running, her skin flushed, a dark pink. She was shiny with sweat. "No, ma'am," I had replied. The hairs on the back of my neck bristled as she moved closer, leaning over the counter. "I miss seeing you." Her voice taking on a warm note, like salted caramel. I wanted to curl up in it, breathe her in. She reached her hand over the counter to place it over mine. I could feel the sweat of her palms as it lay clammy against me. I jerked it back, startled, looking down at my hand, strangely assessing it for injury. By the time I looked back up at her, she was gone. No trace left behind. I tried to go to sleep that night, but couldn't. She haunted me. She said she missed seeing me, and I worried that might be true. I didn't think I had seen her at all since that one night when she kissed me. Had I missed something? I tried closing my eyes, counting sheep, willing myself to sleep, but I couldn't stop the thoughts racing around my head. That and my hand itched like hell. I dreamed of the woods behind the store, dense with foliage, brush untamed holding on to bits of paper wrapper and plastic bags. It appeared almost like the leftover remains of a meal trapped on the teeth of a wooden beast. I saw her body tucked within that maw, her skin even sicker, draped around her like melting candle wax. Her eyes lit the flame. Her hair had slunk off. Her eyelids hung against her cheeks. She held out a hand for me, her fingers dripping blood, flesh drooping against bone. The forest mouth seemed to open, hinging back, displaying her like a pearl in an oyster, like a red tongue in a mouth. She stepped, tree branches catching on her skin, ripping it like wet tissue paper. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run. But in ways, dreams are so often, I couldn't move. I felt her get closer. I could feel that horrible sensation. My skin rebelling against me, itching. She stood a mere foot away from me, grabbing at her own melting visage, shifting it, molding it like warm putty, Finally, she lifted it back, moving it almost like taking of a hood, revealing her face. I woke. Morning shifts got worse. My sleep schedule got thrown off again. I started itching, seeing things in the corner of my eyes, not just bugs anymore. My coworkers really started to worry. My doctor says I need medication, but it takes weeks to start being effective. I don't know how long I can keep going like this. I hear things now too. I hear her in the basement. She whispers to me. She wants me to come back at night, to stay until sunset. She says she has wonderful things to show me. The bugs aren't on my skin anymore. They're in it. I can feel them moving, separating skin from flesh. As much as I scratch, I can't seem to get them out. My arms are a landscape of open wounds, scabs, and raw tissue. I've been trying to wear long sleeves, but I can't stop pulling them up to itch. Customers have started treating me with disgust. I was pulled aside today by the general manager. They're thinking about firing me if I don't get any help. I can't explain that I'm beyond help, that she has me. I am hers now. My coworkers say there used to be a woman that would come up to the window each night once I switched to day shift and ask if I was there. She stopped coming. My coworkers don't know what happened to her, but I do. She's in the building, tucked under the stairs of the basement, waiting for me to stay just long enough for the sun to set. I can see her down there every morning, peeking at me while I count the number of rye loaves and burger buns. The coworkers think we have a mouse infestation. Something keeps eating our leftover cookies and frosted turnovers, but I know the truth. She just has a sweet tooth. It's getting colder outside. I know she can't get me in the sun, but the days are getting shorter. One day I'm going to leave too late, and I know she'll have me. She showed me what she really looked like today when she takes off her skin. In my dream, I never saw it, but right before I left for the day, I went down there rolling her a chunk of raw cookie dough from the freezer. I don't want her contaminating the customer's food. While searching for a sweet treat, she pawed almost into the light, reaching for the dough, and I saw her fleshless hand. "Turn off the lights, love," she whispered to me. I shook my head, my resolve weakening. She came out into the light, further her eyes glowing cat-like in the darkness. "I want you to see me," she whispered. Despite myself, I switched off the basement lights. The room went dark, inky black. She emerged from her den behind the stairs, and I saw her horrible, tremendous self, a display from a Grey's Anatomy book, muscles, tendons, ligaments on full display. I see her even writing this now, her eyes eternally open, blood pooling around her feet, her flesh tender. She holds open her arms towards me like a lover. She says she wants me. I am her chosen. She won't leave without me. I can feel my skin pull from me, flesh yearning for escape from its prison. It wants her too. I don't know how much longer I can resist. I let her touch me in that basement, just my hand. She kissed it again, purposefully this time. I can feel my tissue peel away, like a hangnail that doesn't stop, a whole finger unsheathed from its flesh. I type with it now. Every nerve ending feels born again, sensation free of the dulling of skin. I think I'll go back tonight. Let her run her hands against me and feel as my skin slides free, born anew. I swear the folder wasn't there the night before. I'm not the kind of guy who keeps a messy desktop. I'm almost obsessive about it. Clean folders, everything in its place. So when I powered up my laptop that morning and saw a new folder sitting right there, bold and unassuming, I froze. Unknown user. That was the folder's name. At first I thought maybe it was a prank. My friends are the tech-savvy type, and I'd left my laptop at their place a few days ago. Maybe they got drunk, installed some creepy software to mess with me, but it didn't make sense. They wouldn't go this far for a laugh. I clicked on it. Nothing. It didn't open, didn't load. Nothing changed on the screen. Just this weird moment of hesitation, like the laptop itself was considering whether or not to let me in. And then a line of text appeared across the top of my screen. You've been chosen. I blinked. Was it a pop-up? A message from some app? Maybe a virus? Before I could react, the folder disappeared, vanished like it was never there. I leaned back in my chair, laughing nervously. Of course, it had to be a virus. Maybe I'd clicked something shady online. But as soon as I opened the browser to do a search, the screen flickered. Don't search, it's pointless. The words flashed across my screen in bold red letters. They lingered there, pulsing as if the computer itself was taunting me. I closed the browser window and immediately shut down the laptop. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. This wasn't funny anymore. Maybe it was a hack. Something serious. I grabbed my phone to call one of my friends. Before I could dial, my phone lit up. A no number. I told you, it's pointless. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. There was no way someone was listening, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that my laptop, my phone, hell, maybe even my house wasn't just compromised. It was watching me. I didn't touch my laptop for the rest of the day. I didn't even open my phone. Every little noise made me jump. Every creak in the walls. Every gust of wind rattling the windows. By the time night rolled around, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. No one could hack a laptop that fast and interact with me in real time. It had to be some advanced phishing scam or something. I decided I'd take the laptop to a professional in the morning. Until then, I needed sleep. I locked the laptop in a drawer and crawled into bed. I woke up in the middle of the night to a soft, persistent sound. It was coming from the drawer where I'd locked my laptop. I froze. The rational part of my brain told me it was just a random creak, maybe the house settling. But that tapping had a rhythm, it wasn't random. I got up slowly, heart hammering in my chest. The tapping continued, soft but steady. As I approached the drawer, I could see the faint glow of light coming from the seams. My laptop was on. I hadn't left it on. With trembling hands, I unlocked the drawer and pulled it out. The screen was bright, and there was a single file open. It was a text document. You can't hide from me. Beneath that line was a series of photos. The first was of me, sitting at my desk, staring at my laptop from earlier that morning. The second was of me in bed, tossing and turning, unaware of anything. The third was a picture of me standing right there, in front of the open drawer. The laptop clicked off before I could react. By now, I was convinced someone had hacked my webcam or installed malware, but that didn't explain how it seemed to know where I was, even when the laptop was off. I unplugged the computer and removed the battery. If someone was controlling it remotely, that would stop them, right? Yet, even as I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. My eyes kept darting to the corners of the room, as if expecting to see someone or something standing in the shadows. That's when I noticed the new sound, a faint buzzing, not from the laptop but from my phone. My screen was lighting up again, over and over, as if someone was calling. I picked it up with shaking hands, a new number this time, but the same message appeared on the lock screen. "I see you." I tried turning the phone off, but it wouldn't respond. It just kept buzzing in my hand like it was alive. Then before my eyes, a new message appeared, this time from my own number. "It's too late, you're already part of the game." My vision blurred. I had to sit down before I collapsed. My heart was racing so fast I thought I might pass out. This wasn't normal. This was something else. Something I didn't understand, and no amount of logic could explain. That's when the voices started. They were faint at first, barely whispers, but growing louder with each passing second. I couldn't make out the words, just a constant stream of unintelligible noise. I clutched my head, trying to block them out, but they wouldn't stop. I slammed my phone into the wall, watching as it shattered into pieces. For a moment, the room was silent again, but the relief didn't last long. A soft chime echoed through the room. My laptop, battery removed, still locked in the drawer, had powered itself on. By now, I had to be losing my mind. I grabbed the laptop, fully prepared to smash it to pieces, but as I held it over my head, ready to throw it down, something caught my eye on the screen. The video call had opened up. No name, just a black screen, as if whoever was on the other end was watching from the shadows. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the pixelated blackness. Then slowly a face began to emerge from the void. My face. But it wasn't a reflection, it was me, standing in my living room. I watched as the figure on the screen raised its hand, mirroring my movements, but the smile on its face wasn't mine. It was twisted, wrong, like a distorted version of myself. Then it spoke. "Don't you get it? This isn't a hack. This isn't some game you can win." The figure on the screen leaned closer, filling the entire display with its face. "I'm inside you now." For days after that, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. Every electronic device around me felt like it was pulsing with life, waiting to strike again. I trashed the laptop, bought a new phone, and even stayed at a hotel for a while, thinking I could escape whatever it was. But it didn't matter. Everywhere I went, I felt that presence, watching, waiting, controlling. It wasn't long before I started seeing the figure in reflections, mirrors, windows, even in the glossy surface of a car, the twisted version of me always lurking just out of reach, smiling that horrible smile. It didn't speak again, but it didn't have to. I knew what it wanted. It was taking over. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. My mind is unraveling. I can barely tell what's real anymore. Is this my hand typing these words, or is it his? If you're reading this, maybe you've already seen the signs, the strange messages, the eerie glitches, the reflection that doesn't quite match. Maybe you think it's just a virus, just some glitch in your system, but it's not. They're already inside, and soon they'll be coming for you. Final note, the story you just read may seem like fiction, but be cautious the next time you notice something strange on your device. Sometimes the things we rely on to connect us with the world can also connect us to something far more sinister. Whatever you do, don't open the folder. It's already too late for me. I can remember that last night at camp, as a campfire crackled peacefully in the stone ring in front of us. The grass had been freshly mowed, and the scent of pine lingered in the air. The sound of crickets and other insects was all I could hear as they floated contentedly nearby. The intense heat of the afternoon had finally lessened, and the night sky felt pleasantly cool and refreshing. During the day, the sky was so blue it almost hurt your eyes, but at night it was all inky darkness, and the flickering light of the campfire was the only main source of light. I watched as tiny wisps of smoke slowly climbed into the sky before they disappeared into the dark pine branches. I was close enough to the fire that I watched as the coals pulsed with heat and the embers cast a soothing glow on the surrounding pines. By then, almost everyone else had gone to bed, so it was just Violet and myself. We hadn't said anything to each other for a while, but I had a question I'd been meaning to ask. She was the head camp administrator and knew everything. It was Labor Day weekend, and with the final celebration over, there was just a tiny few of us left to close everything down for the start of camp next year. The end of summer atmosphere and the fact that the camp was now virtually deserted meant that it was the perfect chance to ask something that had been on my mind, but for some reason I hadn't quite been ready to. Why don't we ever go across the lake to the land on the other side? We're not the only people who like to gather around the fire in the woods at night. I was unsure of how to take this. What do you mean? She paused, a hesitant look on her face. Depends on who you ask. I've seen some giant bonfires, some weird dancing, some screeching, and a group of people, but others say people have found things in the morning amidst some smoldering remnants of a fire, bones that they can't be sure are animal or human. Some have sworn people were watching them, not doing or saying anything, just silently watching. Either way, no one's ever bothered us out here. But never forget, someone can always start. There was a silence that hung over the air. I knew she had more to say. What aren't you telling me? I asked. She sighed. I've told you what I've seen, that's it. But that doesn't mean I haven't heard things. I have. Whenever I see a giant bonfire, or better yet, I smell it because it doesn't smell like a normal bonfire. I hear things, strange things I haven't heard anywhere else. Noises that don't sound completely human or completely animalistic. But the worst is when it's not a sight or a sound, but a feeling. Only a few times, maybe 4 or 5 in all the times I've been here, have I felt something, but you better believe that was enough. I've never felt such raw animalistic fear. It's almost like it felt like a literal part of my DNA, and it was so intense my body could barely contain it. It passed quickly, but you don't forget something like that. No, I'm sure you don't. The other thing is that even the fire isn't like normal fires, even from a distance. It looks mostly normal, but there's some tiny difference that stands out. It's not a fire that invites you to sit around, roast marshmallows, and tell stories. It's a warning. For what exactly, I don't know, but a warning is a warning all the same. Fair enough, thanks for telling me. Sure, there's just one other thing. I don't know why or how it happens, but there have been a few times when I'm outside at night, and all of a sudden, the sounds of insects stop buzzing and the frogs stop croaking, completely and simultaneously. It's more than a little unsettling, and every time it happens, I get inside as quickly as possible. I never see or experience anything else, but something tells me to get inside now. She emphasized the final word. So that's what I do, and once inside, I slammed the door shut, and nothing ever happened, but it beats the alternative, no doubt. Just remember, we tell campfire stories, but there are things out there that are the campfire story. We went to bed soon after that. By that time, the fire had burned down to a small glow, and the only lights were the ones scattered intermittently throughout the area. The rest of the area was completely dark, so I was paying close attention to my surroundings. I was halfway back to my cabin when I felt it, the sense that something had changed and not for the better. I quickly looked around, but everything looked exactly the same, so I kept on trying to figure out what was different. Then it hit me. Everything was quiet. No mosquitoes shrilly whizzing by, or no crickets chirping away in the bushes. Everything had fallen completely silent. I could immediately see why Violet had the reaction she did. It was downright eerie. So I had a similar reaction and sprinted the rest of the way to my cabin. It wasn't far, but in the darkness, and with fear trickling down my neck, faster than the sweat from my sprinting, the short distance felt like it had multiplied. When I finally had the door in sight, I frantically unlocked it, tugged it open, and slammed it shut before sliding the deadbolt in place. Only then did I take a deep breath and try to calm down. Everything was exactly in place, and the illumination that flooded the space did not reveal any unwanted surprises. Just like always, I had the cabin to myself, and that had not changed. Nor was there any commotion from outside. No pounding on the door or disembodied scream, just the still summer night. So after a few more deep breaths, I tried to get ready for bed. Once I was under the covers, I switched off the light and looked out the nearby window. My bedroom is on the second floor, and it came with a window overlooking the nearby lake and forest. With the light off, I could just faintly see across the lake, and what looked like a fire just barely flickered from the other side. I don't know why, but I could tell it had just started, as it was just a silver of a flame against the night sky. I could also faintly make out shadows moving near it. The sight sent a chill down my spine, and that chill immediately spread to the rest of my body when I saw the sight of what looked like a boat gliding across the lake's surface. It wasn't like any boat we had here, and the shadow inside it was too large to belong to anyone I knew. I laid there in shock, unsure of what to think or do. I had been a camp counselor out here for years, and I never seen anything like this before. Sure, there were a couple times where I thought someone was watching me at night, here or there, but it turned out to be nothing besides the usual feeling of being out there in the woods at night. The longer I laid there staring out the window, the more I half expected to see something or someone leering outside at me, but nothing happened. At some point I fell asleep and had the creepiest dream where someone in a cheap mask and a black cloak was watching me from the foot of my bed. They didn't do anything or say anything. They just stood there, so still it was unnatural. I eventually woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows. It was warm when I stepped outside, but you could feel summer was slipping away, and the pleasant weather made it easy to shake off what I'd felt the night before. It also didn't hurt that last night had been the last official night we were at camp, and we were all due to leave later tonight. So off I went in search of a quick breakfast that I found in the form of some cereal that Violet and Eric were also having outside. Once I grabbed a bowl, I joined them at a picnic table. "Sleep well, guys?" I asked them after I had started eating. "Okay," Eric said. "I had a crazy dream. Someone broke into my cabin and was watching me while they hid in my closet. Someone wearing a mask. That made me sit up straight, and I wasn't the only one." Violet was looking at both of us with an uneasy expression. "I had a bad dream too. Some people were lurking outside my window, 2 of them, both in robes and masks." Then I told them about my dream. and I told them about what I'd seen and felt last night. For good measure, Eric was pale when I was finished. "I saw that too," was all he could say, and I swear I saw a procession of people with torches coming out of the woods right near the boundary of camp. The three of us sat there in total silence until Violet spoke. "Let's just get everything done and get out of here." That was fine by me because with that ominous air hanging over everything, we finished the few final matters in record time. And then the only thing left was for all the remaining counselors to hop into cars and engage in our usual final camp ritual of a movie and pizza. Over the years, we'd seen several movies on Labor Day weekend, from Raiders of the Lost Ark to Ghostbusters, but this year we were going to Aliens. I loved the original, and I was looking forward to it, and I was not disappointed, because it was an incredible ride of a movie that we all enjoyed that somehow managed to make me forget what had happened the night before, if only for a short time. When it was done, we all went to the local pizzeria and treated ourselves. As always, it was a wonderful time. When we were all done, it was time to return to camp so we could pack up and head out. But the minute we arrived back at camp, the good mood vanished immediately, because right in front of the main lodge, all our luggage and personal belongings that we had already prepared and left in our cabins was all sitting out there waiting for us, and not just thrown on the ground and left in a giant mess either. All the bags and boxes were neatly arranged in separate piles for the person they belonged to. It was definitely odd, but if that was odd, everything else was downright spooky, because written in bright red paint all over the main lodge were the words "Get out and don't come back" in giant letters. But even that wasn't the worst, because hands down the most awful part was the atmosphere. Everything felt heavy and unwelcome. The place looked exactly how we'd left it, but apart from that, it was a different camp entirely, and the air was completely silent, just as it had been last night. Deep down, I knew exactly what it was. We were being watched. We all quickly looked at each other, and then Violet quickly whispered, "Let's just go." That's exactly what we did. Without a word, we each took our belongings, loaded them into the two vehicles we had, and the minute we were ready, we floored it out of there without a second thought. But just as we were pulling out of the driveway, I looked behind us and saw what looked like the forest moving, and I realized I was looking at dozens of people in cloaks coming out of the area we had just left. It was without a doubt the scariest thing I had ever seen. Once we were safely away from camp, we stopped at a nearby grocery store and used their phone to call the camp owner, who in turn called the police. They searched the place and didn't find anything, but that ended up not mattering, because it turned out to be the last season that camp ever had. When the next summer came, the camp owner abruptly announced he was closing the doors and only offered a vague money-related reason. But Violet had some connections to local police through her cousin, and word is that one night, not long after our final night, the owner was there with some people and they were all attacked by a group of people in masks. The camp owner was scared enough he never even called the police. They only knew about it because a random person driving by called them, and the owner refused to press charges or say who did it. All he wanted to do was leave and never come back, which he did because he sold the camp to a property developer. Funny enough, there was an attempt to build an apartment building there after that, but nothing ever worked out. Every time the project was started, something happened, like the foundation fell or there was a flood. The local media even started calling the project cursed. Personally, I don't disagree. Back in April of 2013, I went through something that I haven't been able to talk about. I was paid a significant amount of money to stay quiet in return for signing a 10-year agreement to shut the hell up. Now that the time is up, I've considered my options. I could just let this go and never speak of it again. I won't gain anything from speaking out, and I've got a lot to lose. But then again, this is just an anonymous post online. Words have less meaning that way. West Virginia, it was hotter than usual, without a whiff of wind. I was coming home from a visit to my aunt. She'd broken her leg and couldn't leave her house. I was making my way back home, taking the I-64 out of Lewisburg. It started with the radio. It was playing that one Macklemore song I'd heard 100 times over. The sound was cutting in and out in a quick staccato, then disappeared completely. I could hear cars honking up front as a line began to form. There was a sway in the trees, as if greater and greater pressure was being put on them. I could hear wind rushing against the left side of the car, forcing me to pull the other way to compensate. I closed the sunroof as a dust cloud blew past, staining the windshield. Then a rumble. It sounded like thunder, but from the ground, like a groaning bellow growing louder and clearer by the second. As it reached its peak, I could see trees toppling over. A small Kia got pushed off balance and swerved off the road. As the sound died down, the road devolved into chaos. Some were desperately changing lanes. Others were stepping on the brakes. I got my door scraped as the car behind me sped past. The radio was playing an automated message, a local emergency alert, referred to as a geological event. We were asked to turn off all air conditioning, slow down, and divert to the nearest exit. It repeated in a monotone voice, geological event, no air conditioning, slow down, divert to nearest exit. Minutes passed. There was a line forming further down the road, police officers blocking the lanes in all directions, leaving a highway exit as the only option. Some folks were trying to push past the barricades, but were forced back at gunpoint. I could see officers wearing gas masks and riot shields. We were waved in. I followed the exit and got directed to the right. There was an open field that was used as a sort of impromptu parking lot. Cars were being waved in and parked in a way that boxed us in, leaving no room for us to open our doors in either direction unless we got parked at the edge. 4 lines of cars with about 10 to 15 vehicles per line. Surplus vehicles were directed further down the road. The place was packed. I got stuck in the second row, about 6 cars in. Pretty much everyone around me were on their phones. I didn't have anyone to call, but there seemed to be an issue getting the signal through. The radio was still repeating the emergency message. Voices were getting louder. A man 2 cars to my left leaned out of a gap in the door, screaming at the officers to answer his question. They responded immediately with a warning shot straight into the air. "Stay in your vehicle," they screamed. "Lock your doors, I'm not telling you again." A couple of folks were filming, but there seemed to be trouble uploading. We were losing bandwidth. It didn't take long until phone signals were completely blocked. I think a video or 2 of that officer firing into the air made it online. They were patrolling back and forth. We were told to stay in our vehicles, windows up, doors closed and locked, engines off. I could hear people talking in other cars. Someone said there'd been a natural gas leak from the geological event, and that combustible engines could spark an explosion. Others were talking about a terrorist attack. There were no answers, and the officers weren't eager to talk. After about an hour, things were getting ugly. People were hungry, thirsty, and restless. One officer stepped up on the front cars, handing out water bottles, crackers, and processed cheese slices. He had to step from one car to another, denting the hoods with his steel-tipped shoes. They were also handing out thick black plastic hygiene bags for people who needed to relieve themselves. Use them, seal them, drop them out the door, then lock up and wait. I had crawled into the back seat, pulled down my cap, and tried to relax. I'd been playing some games on my phone, but the battery was running low. I wanted to save some, so I settled for having a nap instead. The sweat was stinging my eyes, not because of how warm it was, but because of how nervous I was. No matter what I did, I felt trapped, and the car felt smaller and smaller. I couldn't get out if I wanted to, and it physically hurt me to think about how little control I had. Is that what claustrophobia feels like? A couple of officers were discussing something by the front line. One of them had a white cotton glove on, which he used to wipe off the hood of one of the front cars. The glove was taken off and put into a bag, which in turn was sealed with a hot air gun. I was getting the impression that our cars had been covered in something. I wasn't the only one considering it. There were 2 college kids in the car to my left, and they were discussing it too. Anthrax. One of them said, "Gotta be. Nah, gold dust." The other chuckled, "They don't want to share." "You know what?" The first groaned, "I honest to God hope you're right. You're not, but I hope you are. Fuck you." I joined in the conversation shortly after. I offered another explanation. Something combustible, something that might blow up if we started our cars. They were willing to consider this. The car behind me couldn't hear us, but the driver held up a notebook with the text, "If we don't know what it is, it's gotta be aliens." I couldn't tell if they were serious, but they weren't laughing about it. A man in his 50s and what looked like his daughter. There were a couple of other folks in the other cars. A man in a black shirt, sort of looked like a preacher without a collar. 2 middle-aged women with a kid in the back seat. A fat man blaring Johnny Cash from his stereo. A couple with a teenage son who couldn't stop drumming on the windows. We'd been stuck for about 2, maybe 2.5 hours when a truck rolled in. One of those with a large water tank. It was unmarked. Looked civilian as it rolled in. They were calling out on the megaphone, "We'll be hosting your vehicles down." They said, "Keep everything locked and closed. Then we'll be covering your vehicle with protective plastic while we wait for it to dry. After that, we'll start letting you go in an orderly manner." I repeat, most of us were relieved. It was only a matter of time now. It was getting dark. They were getting up on the cars, hosing them down thoroughly. It smelled of chlorine, so maybe they'd mixed something into the water as they came. To my car, they stepped up on it and double-checked the sunroof, making sure it was locked and secured. They sprayed the car down, bathing it in chemical stink, the kind that gets stuck to the back of your throat. It took a long time for them to finish, at least an hour or 2. After that, they were rolling out a kind of plastic cover at the short side of the lot, the kind you use to protect pools or rain covers for football fields. They used 2 squad cars to slowly drape the thing over the entire lot, securing the edges with large rocks. "Please stay calm," they called out as the plastic crawled all over us. "I know this is uncomfortable, but this is for your own safety. Once the cleaning is done, You will be free to go. Stay inside your vehicle at all times. I repeat. I did as I was told. I stayed inside and I watched that plastic cover sweep over me. It felt like getting buried alive. All lights went out, leaving me in a complete darkness, accompanied only by the vague disembodied voices of the others. The college kids were talking about where they were going to go after this. Someone was honking, not sure if it was to show support or discontent. Someone else was cheering. I took my last swig of water, washing down my final plain cracker. I got back in the driver's seat. I could hear as they finished moving the plastic cover and parking their squad vehicles. I waited patiently, figuring it'd be maybe another hour or so. They hadn't really given us a timeline, but I could breathe a little easier, sort of. I was going back and forth between feeling empowered with my hands on the wheel and feeling like I was stuck in a metal coffin. It was so dark and everything smelled of plastic and chemicals, like a car wash stuck in time. As the excitement died down, I paid more attention to the background sounds. I tried to filter out the various discussions from the nearby cars, and somewhere in the distance, I heard raised voices. It wasn't coming from the cars, but the officers. Whatever they were talking about, it was a heated discussion. An hour came and went, and people were getting impatient. More cars were honking. Others were yelling, demanding answers. I couldn't get my leg to stop shaking. The more I thought about getting out of there, the smaller the car felt. I was hyper-focusing on things I couldn't control. I was a little thirsty, and I was out of water. I needed to use the bathroom. I wanted to stretch my legs and go for a walk. I wanted to breathe fresh air and get that awful chemical taste out of my mouth. I heard cars starting, accelerating. The truck was moving somewhere off to the side. "We need you to stay in your vehicle," a voice screamed over the megaphone. "Do not leave for any reason. Stay in your vehicle." Cars speeding off. Not many, but a couple, then quiet. The officers left us there. Everyone was quiet. A couple of folks had opened up their phones, using them as flashlights to look from car to car, looking out at the sea of vehicles, all of us trapped under that dark cover. I could see a handful of lights cut off by sharp silhouettes. I couldn't make out who was in the dark. It was all just people, anonymous. I heard a gasp somewhere in the back. There was a metallic clunk, like when the officers climbed atop our cars to get us our water. There was a careful cheer as some folks figured they were taking off the plastic cover, but that wasn't it. Instead, there were more footsteps. The cheers slowly died down as more and more footsteps pattered across our cars. I stopped counting after a dozen. The silhouettes in the other cars were still. We all held our breaths, waiting for an answer to show itself. What the hell was going on? What was that sound? Somewhere off to my right, I heard a voice. "Who's up there?" It sounded like an older man. I'd seen a pickup truck that way earlier. Almost as a response, the footsteps stopped. There was a faint clicking sound, like someone snapping their tongue against the roof of their mouth. Click, click. And from further away, a click in response. From somewhere to my left, another couple clicks. Then a cascade of clicks. Dozens, maybe hundreds. There was an awful metallic noise coming from my right. Then, breaking glass, a scream cut short, followed by several irregular taps of the car horn. One of the silhouettes in the distance turned into a blur as something passed through the windshield, cutting through the plastic cover. Somewhere in the front row, the roof of a car was cut wide open. Someone was pulled up out of their seat. 2 cars back from where I was, there was more glass breaking. It sounded like a wild animal got in. I could see a weak hint of red splattered against the passenger side windows. I wasn't getting any air. I could feel my heart beating through my chest as my arms started shaking. My hands were cramped around the steering wheel, and I felt sweat dripping down my shoulders. I couldn't control it. I didn't even see what was going on, but these sounds, these screams, they awakened something primal. This was danger, a threat. My body knew long before I did. The college kids in the other car were ducking down. One of them waved a hand at me, as if telling me to get down. I nodded. I scrambled into the back seat. I couldn't see where I was putting my hands or feet. Everything is different in the dark. As I tumbled my way over, my foot accidentally tapped the car horn. It was a quick tap, a fraction of a second, but to me it was the loudest sound in the world. I was lying on my stomach in the back seat, and within seconds, something heavy climbed onto the hood of my car. I could feel the car buckling. It was much heavier than the man who had passed out water bottles. I held my hands in front of my mouth to stop the panting, but I just ended up snorting up sweat instead. My nose stung as I bit my tongue, listening to every metallic groan as whatever was outside moved and shifted. Click, click, and from behind my car, a click in response. There were no lights being held up anymore. Everyone was cowering, going quiet. I pushed myself up against the door behind the driver's seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. I could hear the frame of the car complain as something slowly moved. When it came to my sunroof, there was a slight crack that made it stop. Another crack. I silently shook my head as if trying to ask the car to stop. That thing was going to break. Another crack. I silently shook my head as if trying to ask the car to stop. That thing was going to break, and it did. My legs were showered with glass as a big blob of plastic cover dipped into my car. Something big came tumbling into the front seat, still covered in protective plastic. It twitched and spun around, its clicking turning from a careful question-like noise to a never-ending barrage. It was calling for help, alerting others, and it was cutting its way through the plastic. There were footsteps coming from every direction, some of them leaping from car to car, some of them leaping far enough to skip a car as they hurried. I was going to be swarmed within seconds. I fumbled with my hands, accidentally cutting my thumb on the broken glass. I managed to open the passenger side door, but even at its wildest, and even when pressing into the college kid's car, it wasn't enough room to get out. Still, I had to try. I pressed myself into the gap and exhaled as much as I could, flattening my chest. While the thing thrashed around inside my car, I could feel my vision going faint. Black spots popped up at the edge of my vision. My arms were going weak, and yet by some miracle, I made it through. As my face hit the gravel of the makeshift parking lot, I felt the burn of residual chemicals. I swallowed my instinct to run, instead staying on my stomach, forcing myself to crawl under my car. There were more of them, some climbing on, some off. My chest was pressed to the ground. As the weight shifted, I heard breaking glass from the windshield and tearing fabric. Something was stuck up there, and it was furious. Like a trapped animal, I could hear the college kids mumbling to one another, trying to stay calm, one assuring the other that all they had to do was stay low, stay quiet, and wait. Then something slammed into the passenger side door, the one I'd crawled out of. The door was pressed up against the neighboring car, then fell haphazardly to the ground, completely off the hinges. An ink-black bird-like foot touched the ground right next to me. I've looked it up since. There were 3 toes forward, 1 toe backward, all clawed, and a pterodactyl feet, similar to that of many birds of prey, except larger than a human foot, and with smooth oil-slick skin. It must have been heavy. at least 400 pounds. If the clicking noise came from its mouth, I can approximate that it was somewhere around 6'7" to 6'9" or taller. It could have been hunched over. How it managed to walk in the gap between the vehicles is beyond me, but I suspect it was very thin. It daintily walked from my car to the others, as if scanning for something. I could barely see anything in the dark, but this thing seemed to navigate it perfectly. It didn't bump into anything. There was a tap on the glass of the car behind me to my right, and someone got startled. A short scream, and the hunt was on. This time was different. It must have caused some kind of chain reaction, as all of a sudden the plastic cover was getting torn up left and right. People were clawing their way out of their cars. I heard someone kicking against their windshield. Another was trying to open their door. I could hear it slamming against the side of the car next to them, and off in the distance, there was gunfire, just a couple of shots. The college kids in the car next to me slammed their doors open and followed my lead. They rolled onto the ground, and under their car, there was a little more light coming in as the cover had been torn above. Their faces were red from tears, and one of them was desperately trying to call for help on his phone. The other grabbed the phone out of his hand. A short scuffle ensued, ending with them putting on a ringtone and sliding the thing as far to the left as they could. Whatever car that phone landed under was demolished, every window broken, every passenger gone. I could hear the grinding as a seat was ripped in two and thrown away. In a matter of seconds, an entire vehicle was torn to pieces as a dozen of those things swarmed it. "Shut up!" one of the college kids repeated. "Shut up, shut up, shut up!" Something reached under my car. It scraped against the sole of my shoe, tearing a hole all the way to my big toe. I hurried forward, scurrying like a lizard. The college kids noticed and followed suit. I don't think they thought about it too much. It was just a movement, and they went for it. I made it 2 cars down before I got stuck. There was something dark in the way, and I couldn't get around it without exposing myself. I couldn't see what it was, but it didn't take long for me to figure it out. There was a meaty crunch, as if someone was biting chunks out of a piece of meat. It was struggling to get through the fabric of their clothes, making a snapping noise as threads gave way. A pool of blood rolled under the car, staining the tip of my fingers. It was still warm. One of those things were eating a victim. I hunkered down, trying to remember to breathe, and I stayed there waiting for a chance. Any chance. I must have stayed there for at least an hour, hearing every bite, every crack of bone and snap of sinew. Satisfied clicking noises. As it finished its meat, it wandered off, dragging the remains along. They were moving forward. Something heavy walked over the car I was hiding under, dragging a body along. Slowly the footsteps disappeared. It was quiet again, and in that quiet I found my footing. I made my way to the edge of the plastic cover. I listened one final time, pushed one of the weights away, and slipped through. They were gone, and I was out. I could feel my chest growing lighter, allowing me to breathe. I wanted to cry from relief. A breeze was picking up, drying the sweat on my brow, and carrying the smell of grass. Stepping back, I turned towards the sea of cars to see how bad the damage was, and then I saw one. It was a bit off to the side, perching on top of an old Honda. At a glance, it looked like a tall person covered in a slick black ink, but looking closer you could see the strange bird-like feet, the pointed nails, the long row of shark-like teeth on a mouth that was far too wide. I froze. The thing rose to its full length, easily over 7 feet tall. It looked ready to pounce on me. I had nothing to defend myself with. I couldn't make any sudden moves. I wouldn't even be halfway under the car before that thing would be over me. 100 thoughts raced through my mind. but there was nothing I could do. I was out of options. But the thing just looked at me. It raised a slice of raw meat. Blood dripped onto the plastic cover. It looked at me curiously, taking a bite. Then, as if nothing had happened, it wandered off, satiated. I was left there shaking like a dry leaf, and with the last one of those things gone, all that was left was the panic. It didn't take long for the officers to return. The plastic cover was removed, but we couldn't go home, not after this. Some folks signed a waiver and were let go immediately. They weren't allowed to talk about what they'd seen, and in return, they'd get a hefty sum of insurance money. Others demanded answers and were taken into custody for obstruction of justice. A few others still were too panicked to make any kind of sense and had to be checked out by medical personnel. A total of 14 people died. It was described by a combination of causes: a traffic pileup, carbon monoxide poisoning, animal attack. I think there was something about an escaped convict too. Excuses all over the place, and the times were all wrong, spread out through a couple of days to more smoothly blend into accident statistics. And if you wanted to go home and get your insurance money, you had to sign a non-disclosure. I did too. I know the college kids did as well. Goddamn miracle they made it out, but I saw them. 34 cars had to be towed, 18 people wounded, 6 seriously so, 4 people lost at least one limb. One guy had an arm ripped off halfway up his collarbone. I don't know how he survived. Most people never saw those things up close. They just remember the screams and the breaking glass. Sometimes at night, that's all I hear too. Closing my eyes reminds me of lying under those cars, feeling the pressure as the weight shifted. I still get trouble breathing. I think a part of me is still stuck there. It stayed in my vehicle. I got off the train this morning at about 9:30 from the gym. It was approximately a 2-minute walk from the train station back to my house, which made the pouring rain seem a little less miserable. I entered our estate as usual, expecting to see the whole thing completely deserted, as it regularly was, but instead I saw an unfamiliar woman getting out of a red car, holding a large box. Our family had known the people in our area for a long time. No one ever moved. No one ever left, which was probably the reason this felt so strange. But I just presumed this was a new resident just settling in, so I gave her a smile. She was dressed in a red raincoat, navy blue jeans, and ridiculously shiny red rain boots. Her face was pale, like you'd think a ghost would be, and yet again, a red shade of lipstick. She stared at me for a while before smiling back, and quickly turned around. Her movements were almost like a robot's, very controlled and almost impeccably repetitive. My mom had left a key underneath the plant pot in the open garage, as she had went out to our local city, which was just about half an hour away by car. That meant I was home alone, as my older brother was working. I got in, locked the door behind me, and jumped straight into the shower, eager to rinse off the sweat from my body. By this time, I had almost erased the lady in red from my memory completely and brushed it off without any further thoughts. I dried myself off, put some clothes on, and sat down on my chair, ready to start up my PC. Just before I pressed the button to activate my computer, I heard an incredibly loud knock on the door, one only my family do, as we had a Ring doorbell with strangers usually use. I ran downstairs, looked through the peephole, but to my surprise, it was the lady in red. "Hello?" I asked. I just wanted to find out what she wanted so I could start on my Minecraft server as quickly as possible. "Hello," she replied, in an eerily slow way. "Are you all alone?" she asked, very peculiarly. "Yes. May I ask why?" No reason. Just curious to why a young boy of your age was to be left all alone on his own. That's all. I was 15 male, so I didn't get these types of comments regularly. I thought it was a little creepy at first. Sorry, but why is it any of your business?" I snapped back defensively. Her body had jolted up as I had said this, as if a robot had just been powered on. "I'm sorry, I'm just thinking for your... She paused for a moment. "Well-being," she remarked. "Look, lady, how about you find something else to do instead of bothering teenagers to find out if they're home alone or not?" She laughed slowly and creepily. "I'm sorry, but I must insist I come in and make sure you're supervised." I immediately replied with, "No thanks, my mom's coming back soon, it'll be alright." I didn't wait for a response, as I quickly shut the door in her face and ran back up to my room and instantly texted my mom. She said she'd be straight back and left right away from her beauty appointment. After about 15 minutes, I figured I better get some breakfast, as I was starving at this point, so I went downstairs, checked the Ring doorbell to make sure that the lady had gone, and went into the kitchen to get myself some cereal. As my mom got back, I immediately told her what happened, and we had decided to check the doorbell footage and call the cops. We went through the footage. Nothing was there, just me talking to an empty doorway. My heart stopped. My mom then scolded me before giving me a lecture about how not to make stuff up like that. Despite how much I tried to convince her, nothing worked, and she then drove back to her appointment, leaving me alone again. I sat down on the couch and began to watch the zombie show I was watching, and down to the 10th season, there wasn't much to go. After a couple episodes and about 3 hours of binge watching, I got a text from my mom again, saying how she was going to be out for the rest of the day, so don't bother her. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do. I went into the kitchen to get myself a drink. I entered the kitchen. Through the window, I could almost see a woman trying to peer into the house. It was the lady in red. I banged on the window and told her to fuck off, and if she came again, I'd get the cops involved. She didn't take this lightly, as she gave me a look of pure hatred before she walked away. This made my heart sink. I couldn't text my mom, my brother. I didn't know what to do, so I went up to my bedroom, locked the door, shut the curtains and the window. I felt a sense of safety now. I didn't even realize the time was 2 o'clock already. I was terrified of the thought of how long she was really out there for, watching me, unaware of her intentions. I tried to put this in the past by logging on to my PC. I thought I'd have a quick session. Hours passed by as I played Minecraft for God knows how long. The clock read 9:10, so I thought I would call it a day on my PC. So I go into bed and watched some more of my TV show. I hadn't had anything to do with the lady in red since. So I thought that was it. My mom still wasn't home, and my brother was going to be at a bar for a couple more hours. He had just finished work. I rolled onto my left side in bed. My curtains were closed, but there was a small enough gap to see through outside, about 6 inches. I thought about dozing off and calling it a night before I saw a familiarly smooth, shiny red surface. It looked like a coat, which made my heart stop. It must be the lady in red. I opened my window instantly, but to my relief, nothing was there. This time I left the curtains open, the window locked, and I was aware. I dozed off for a while before I woke up. At this time, it was now pitch black. but I could see an image through the window. The lady in red again. This time I was convinced something was there. She was staring at me blankly, without emotion. She looked like she had something in her hands. A knife. I unlocked the door, quickly opened it, but as soon as I did so, the image of her vanished. I must have been hallucinating, I thought to myself. But to my devastation, I had realized my grave mistake. The image was a reflection. I remember the day I was on my way home from school, but I didn't go directly home. Instead, I took the long way to keep walking and listening to music, but I wish I never had, because that was when I found a head. I was walking the trail I sometimes took when I wanted a bit of extra time before I arrived home. More me time, you could say. So I carried along the track until something caught the corner of my eye. Something white. I stopped to look down the bank and saw a white sack lying deep in the grass beneath the tall bushes that surrounded the edge. Curious to know what it was, I put down my Walkman and crawled carefully down the bank. I was getting caught on every other branch on my way down. I was starting to think this may not be worth what I might find. But I was wrong. I finally made it down and crept closer to the bag, which seemed to glow. I mean, it was daylight. I could see as clearly as anything, but the bag had a presence I had never felt before. As I got closer, my heart pounded faster and faster, as if something was warning me not to touch it. Then I was right in front of it. I was right there. I carefully picked the bag up and undid the rope that had tied the bag shut. But before I could open it, I heard something behind me. I tied the bag up and crawled up the hill. With the bag slung over my shoulder, I headed home quickly. What could it be? It could be a bag of money. I'll surely be rich. It could be gold or silver. Whatever it was, it had some heft to it. I ran up the stairs to my house, opened the door, ran straight to my room and threw the bag on the bed. Mother yelled, "Dinner's ready!" And I cried, "Coming!" I looked at the bag a bit more, inching further toward it. I picked up the bag, trying to feel how heavy it was. It seemed like it had been a better day or two. It smelled, and it had mold growing on the sides. I pulled the rope to undo the bag and looked inside. My whole body froze and started to shake, sweat dripping from my face and covering my eyes. Blinded by sweat, I looked stunned at what I saw. It was a human head. I pulled the bag down as I looked and gazed at it. I cannot tell you why it was there, but I know this. It was human, but also, at the same time, not. The eyes were shrunken inside themselves, glazed purple and blue. The skin was a tint of green. The hair was pure silver, and the lips were ruby red. I just stared at it for what felt like an eternity. Then I snapped out of my daze. My mother was crying out for me again. I put it back in the bag, tied it back up, threw it in my closet, and ran out the door. As I ate dinner that night, I sat in silence. People would try and make conversation, and I would stare at them as if I did not know what they were saying. I quickly finished and returned to my room to continue inspecting this thing. As I ran back, my mother looked at me and asked, "What's wrong with you tonight? Anything you need to tell me?" I told her, "No, I'm just tired." And off I went. As I opened my door, I felt a shiver run down my spine, something that still, to this day, I have never felt. I shut the door and went straight to my closet. As I pulled it open, it was nowhere to be seen. I looked high and low, the top and bottom shelves, even under my bed. I could not find it anywhere. Finally, I yelled at my mother and asked, "Did you touch the bag inside the closet?" She came in and sternly told me she had not been in my room and asked, "What's with you tonight?" I assured her nothing was wrong, and I got into bed. As I lay there watching TV, I couldn't help but feel terrified of what had just happened. How could this be? It was there 30 minutes ago. I saw, found, touched, and now it's gone. I stared at the empty closet all night. Needless to say, I only got 2 hours of sleep. The next day, after I got out of bed, I looked again, and still nothing. Maybe it was all an illusion, just a weird fever dream. I got ready for school and did my usual routine: shower, get dressed, have breakfast, then head out the door to walk to school. Listening to the teachers blather on about history was an ordinary Wednesday. The bell rang at the end of the day, and off I went. I was walking home with my friends, and one by one, they said goodbye and walked into their homes. Then I walked further down and saw the long path to home. I thought, no, I won't be going down there again. I continued until I looked back. Something told me to take that path back home again, as it was my usual way home. So I turned around and headed back and down the same track. I put in my earphones and kept walking. I was near where I saw the bag last time. Then, in the corner of my eye, I saw the bag in the exact spot I had seen it before. I moved closer to get a better view, and it was the same bag, mold and all still caked on it, still stuck underneath the thick bush that surrounded it. I ran back home, and I never walked the path again. I am a third-year college student. I have been dating this girl for almost a year now. I met her for the first time when I was working on a college essay in between lectures while I was sitting on a bench in the college yard. There were multiple benches with tables all around the yard intended for students to use. The college was right next to a small forest of sorts, so I liked the breath of nature I got from there, unlike the city air. The sun was setting when I was doing the assignment. The lamps were turned on at the time. There were enough lamps to light up the whole outdoor area. I was very absorbed in doing this assignment of mine that I did not even notice the girl who sat right next to me, staring at me for some reason. When I looked at her, she smiled at me. I smiled back to her. The first day we didn't really talk to each other. I was about to say something to her, but could not because of my shyness, so it was soon time for my lecture, so I left. After finishing the lecture at about 10 p.m., I was headed home. She was still sitting on the same bench. She did not have a phone, nor did she have a book or anything of the sort. She seemed to stare at random places. It seemed like she was observing everything that went around her. I did not pay much heed to her because I was in a hurry to get back home. On the next few days, I did not see her at the college. This felt strange. because if we were attending the same college, we would have run into each other at least once in every few days, but we did not. I thought that it was because she had a different major. One day at sunset, as I was with my college friends, I saw her by herself on a bench. I wanted to go up to her and say hi to her, so I did it. It took a lot of courage because I had little to no experience with talking to girls, but to my surprise, we hit it off really well, despite my shyness and inexperience with talking to girls. She told me that her name was Stella. We shared a few hobbies/interests, like writing for example. I asked Stella what her major was. She told me that she was doing bachelor's in business, so this meant that we had no classes in common. Days passed by and I started developing feelings for her, and she did me. I didn't know that she liked me too at the time, so one day I decided to confess to her and did it. To my surprise, she confessed that she had feelings for me too. It was my first relationship. We went on coffee dates often and spent time with each other a lot. A few months passed by, and then things began to change. Of course, because I was such a lover boy, I did not notice it at first. I would get weird glances from my friends whenever they saw me with her. At some point, I even thought that my friends were just making fun of me. Whenever I asked them what was so funny, they'd just brush it off. My friends were not the only ones who acted strange. My GF was acting that way as well. She was such a chatterbox before, but now she was acting like someone who could barely speak. I decided to confront this issue directly and ask her what was wrong. "Hey, what's up?" I asked her curiously. She did not answer me and stayed silent for a while. I wondered if she did not like something I did and itched for an answer. After some attempts, she finally answered. "It's nothing," was what she said, but I didn't believe her because there was obviously something going on with her. She started distancing herself a bit from me. It got worse, to the point where we had this talk, where she apologized to me and made up with me. I was so glad that we made up. I met up with her regularly on the bench, pretty much every day. On some nights, I don't see her on the benches. I see some sort of a black apparition that disappears as soon as I get close to it. It would slowly fade into the light. I would just write it off as me just seeing things. And then one day, as I was about to go up to Stella, one of my friends stopped me in my tracks. "Dude, why do you always talk to yourself there? That's weird," my friend asked. I got chills down my spine the moment he said that, and then I turned to look at Stella. She was staring at me, wide-eyed. Her eyes were too wide to be considered human eyes. It looked like bulging bug eyes. The minute I saw that, I turned around because I could not bear to look at the scary figure. I was absolutely speechless. So this is why my friends looked at me like I was a crazy person. Whenever I went to Stella, the whole time I was talking to myself. I felt both embarrassed and extremely scared. I could not focus in class because my mind was too busy thinking about Stella and what to do about the situation. After my classes ended, it was almost midnight. I stayed behind a bit to complete an assignment and soon finished it. As I started my way home, there she was, on one of the college benches. There was Stella, but in her true form. She was covered in wounds. While smiling broadly from ear to ear, she opened her mouth broadly as I approached her, with her razor-sharp teeth in full view under the light. But I hesitated to go there because she was there. "Come here, you moron," she said with an angry, raspy voice. It sent chills down my spine. Without wasting any second, I quickly ran the opposite direction and went upstairs, since the only exit was past Stella. After I got upstairs, I looked at the bench to see if she was still there. She was gone. I turned around after that, and there she was, right in front of me with the creepiest smile imaginable. I was too shocked to even move a single muscle in my body. I absolutely froze up. She did not waste any time and grabbed my neck. She was capable of such power that I don't think that even 3 full-grown men could take her on. She then began thrashing me about, and then I was thrown near a fire extinguisher. I quickly took it and got her off guard by throwing it at her. While she was distracted, I ran away as fast as I possibly could and exited the college building. I did not even look back. I heard her raspy voice behind me, screaming and shouting. As soon as I got out of the college yard, however, for some reason, the sounds suddenly completely stopped. I went straight home, and I couldn't sleep at all that night. I've shared this story with a friend of mine who used to study at this same college. I described the girl to him, and he told me that I was lucky to have escaped her because most ended up disappearing. He told me that most of the guys who met her have disappeared and still never had been found. And upon further searching, I found out that she is a college-bound entity, so I am too afraid to go to college now, and haven't gone to college ever since. That is the only thing I can do to be safe. I love open floor layouts. When you grow up crammed in a small house with 3 other kids and your parents all sharing 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, you develop an appreciation for space. I like the breathing room. I like feeling like I can stretch out. It's like the everything the light touches scene from The Lion King when I look at my open floor plan condo. It's a beautiful thing. Move-in was completely painless as well, as I'm on the ground floor. I've got these huge glass panes on either side of the front door. It's a real modern apartment. I've come a long way since my childhood, so it almost feels like the entire street, the open field and trees on the other side. Everything out there is part of my condo. It's all my domain, my territory. Even when I'm doing chores, I genuinely feel content just looking at it all. I get to see my neighbors walking their dogs and wildlife playing in the grass. I also harbor a great appreciation for films and television shows, so I laid out my furniture to accommodate immersion. When I'm really absorbed in a work, it's basically the only time I don't want to be thinking about how much I love my condo. So, across from the entrance, the TV stands against the wall, and the couch in between, facing the TV of course. The kitchen's off to my left. The door to my bedroom is past the dining area to my right. Because of the limited distance between my couch and my TV, my field of view is mostly taken up by the screen. The glare can get annoying on a sunny day due to the aforementioned glass panes by the entrance, but I mostly watch in the evenings, so the trade-off is worth it to me. All I see is the TV. Last night, I was watching a period piece drama that took place in 19th century England. It's great junk food TV for when I get home from work and I don't really want to use my brain. The camera work can be a bit lazy, but the actors look nice and the costumes are really detailed. Consequently, I don't mind when the camera lingers on a shot for a little too long. Moments like that can be immersive in their own way. I felt my eyes start to put up a fight, but there was one episode left in the season, so I decided to stick it out and watch it. Midway through the episode, it happened. I fell asleep. It happens. I can't always force myself awake, even when I'm engaged with the story. Never one to admit defeat, I tried to rewind to where I slipped out of consciousness. My entertainment system had other plans. For some reason, I couldn't rewind past a certain point. About 5 minutes after I passed out, it was a dialogue scene, a medium profile shot of a girl in a frilly dress and a man in a very nice suit against a floral wallpaper. I tried mashing the button, but it hit a wall in the playback. It wasn't supposed to be doing this. The intrigue woke me up fully, and I restarted the entire system. When I hit resume on the show, it put me right back at that point, and the same problem happened again. I hit play to see if that would do anything. And as the characters began discussing their mutual friend, my remote stopped working entirely. There was no useful guidance to be gained from a couple Google searches, so I gave up. I put my phone back in my pocket and looked up, only to be met with silence and both of the on-screen characters making direct eye contact with the camera. Dead silent, blank expressions. It felt like they were actually looking at me. When had they stopped talking? I hadn't noticed. For a moment, I thought I must have accidentally paused it, but I could see them breathing. This had never happened before in the entire run of the show. I had no idea what was going on. The girl's expression shifted slightly to this subdued sadness, almost disappointment, like someone at a call center having to scam yet another elderly person out of their retirement. My stomach dropped, her arms slowly raised in fits and starts, pointing at the camera, pointing behind me. I felt every nerve in my body change, a horrible pulse of the most ugly and vicious dread I have ever felt. My hands and feet felt like ice, my neck felt exposed. I was too aware of the skin on the back of my skull tightening up. I had to look. The glass panes. A man standing just to the right of my door, just outside. His nose too high on his face, unnaturally long philtrum, thin wide lips. His hands between his brow and the glass, leaning in, peering in, peeping, watching, looking, staring right at me, and my body was ice. A sort of hyper-awareness. I felt the air in my condo like it was part of my body, like my nerves extended out and beyond my form and stretched into the cavernous room, the precious space between he and I. I felt every disturbance. I could see everything, hear everything. I was so in the moment that it seemed to stretch on forever. It only lasted milliseconds before every muscle in my body contracted and I let loose from my throat in a distorted white noise, a scraping or scratching scream. I've never screamed before. I scrambled to my feet and he just watched. I looked around my apartment for something I could use to defend myself, but finding nothing, I looked back to see him moving away, his legs somehow moving his torso with no sway, no bob, and he didn't break eye contact. Not for a second, not for a moment, not for anything. I'd never wanted so badly to curl into a ball and cry and just not exist. Could I even call the cops? He didn't commit a crime. I looked to my kitchen, finding the knives, and in my peripheral vision, I saw it. His face was on my screen, 2 of them, imposed on the characters on my TV, still pointing. My head swiveling, turning like a top on a table, rotation, centrifugal force exercising slightly on my eyes and nose, and the protrusion of the back of my skull, my hair pushed by the air that wanted to stay still, and he was there, just behind my couch, just feet away from me, still with his hands positioned, like he was looking through glass, the door unopened. My panic gripped me and I just fell over, genuinely fainted. Today, I awoke and found my TV missing. It was the only thing missing. The police came to my house, looked around. I told them about the man's appearance and behavior, but I left out the images I saw on my TV. The strange blurring of my reality in those moments. I don't think it really matters. I don't even know if it was real. Maybe it was my subconscious filling in the blanks of knowing there was someone watching me. I don't know. Is such a thing possible? Can you tell when someone's watching you?